I welcome everybody in the event of EU plan for 50 billion, what Ukraine should do. I am Maria Repko from the Center for Economic Strategy. I'll facilitate today's event. It will happen in Ukrainian with simultaneous translation into English. You may choose the translation channel on the bottom bar of Zoom.
On the panel below in your Zoom window. Прохання залишати питання
I ask you to put your questions to the panelists in QA Zoom section or in the chat, and I will receive the questions. I want to thank all those who make this event possible. This is the Society for Post-Recovery Ukraine and its preparation to join the EU. Now we have problems. Anna Jarosz-Friis has some technical problems to connect the Directorate of Ukraine Service Division in EU Commission. We hope very much she will join us. She writes as they do all possible to enable it. And meanwhile, I shall start this event. We have many speakers who can describe professionally with deep expertise about what happens and what shall happen around this plan for Ukraine. So I will give an introductory review of what this plan is and why is it so important for us. And then I will give the floor to our panelists, to our speakers. What is this plan? I liked very much the description in the EU document. It sounds like to enhance political EU ambitions with financial leverage. It means the ambitions to enlargement and regarding Ukraine, to ambitions to cooperate with Ukraine, and these ambitions will be supported with very tangible 50 billion euro. And Ukraine will be able to do a lot using this money. We'll hope this will be efficient assistance and it will happen. This money could be used to cover the assistance in the overcoming of social, psychological, and other sequel of the war, recovery, creation of new jobs, post-war economics creation, make resilience, progress of integration to the global market, into EU markets, which will be our main and the most priority. EU will be our main trade partner. Military support, humanitarian aid to IDPs will be separate from this plan, and all the rest of financial resources provided by EU to Ukraine will stay inside this facility. It will substitute the bilateral current support and microfinancial support, for which we are very grateful to EU, which was provided this year's warriors and in the previous year. Also, it will substitute the so-called IPA fund. It is the support which EU normally gives to pre-accession countries to help them in that. It will be a broad and comprehensive facility which will finance the reforms Ukraine needs to conduct, so to make next step in its way towards Euro integration. I see Anna is already attending, so I'll tell just a couple words and then I will give the floor to Anna. We have three. The structure of this facility has three pillars. First is the grant and loan support. It covers most of the expenses for some social and other targets. Everything that goes through state budget. Now, the second pillar the program is having is Ukrainian investment framework, which will include, among others, guarantee and the insurance of investment risks for foreign investors. It may be used for municipalities, state and private companies. And the third pillar of the program is using is technical assistance and other support aids for functioning of different instruments, including the monitoring and anti-corruption instruments to see how the funds of EU will be used. And what I like especially in the formulation, in the wording of this document, that the funds of this third pillar might be used, will be used also to make Russia pay. We are grateful to European and American taxpayers for their support for not leaving Ukraine alone without financial resources at all. So this budgetary support is very important, but obviously we would like the aggressor country, Russia, would pay for that. So within this third pillar, we eventually may rely on that some work on bringing Russia to also financial liability will be made. The loan conditions will be very mild. Those will be long-term loans. A part of money will be in grants, not to repay, but with all that, the financial interests of EU should be protected in the facility. And the conditions of this protection are rather strict, rather rigorous, like the conditions, the requirements for Ukraine for this plan to happen. Now I invite Anna Jarosz-Friis, the Directorate of Ukrainian Service of the relevant Directorate of Euro Commission. And I see you are with us, and I hope you now can join us and talk us more in detail about this plan. Please, if possible, let us start from technical steps of what else should be done now to approve this plan at the level of EU, and what do you expect from Ukraine for the use of those resources? What Ukraine has to fill in this plan, to put in this plan? The floor is yours, Anna.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. So maybe just to clarify what has to happen between now and the end of the year in relation to the facility and in relation to the plan and what Ukraine has to do. I think first, it is important to remember that this is a Commission proposal. So the instrument is not yet there from the legislative point of view, and the member states have not yet approved the money. So what we are engaging at the moment in the Union is the interinstitutional negotiations between the Council and the European Parliament to work and eventually approve the Ukraine facility as the instrument on the basis of which we can support Ukraine for the next 4 years. And at the same time, member states are looking at the budgetary side of it, meaning the 50 billion, which we don't have in our current long-term budget. And that's why we are asking member states to increase the union budget in order for us to be able to support Ukraine. So this is what is happening in terms of negotiations in the European Union. In parallel, in order not to lose time, we have encouraged the Ukrainian government to work already now towards preparing the Ukraine plan, which is a counterpart to receiving the support, so that come January 2024, we can smoothly proceed to disbursing the money on the basis of the plan. A couple of important points. We propose a support over 4 years because we think it's very important that Ukraine has some stability and perspective in order to plan. And in order to plan a comprehensive reform roadmap and investment for something that we hope will become a growth plan for Ukraine in the next 4 years. So what Ukraine needs to do is needs to prepare the plan, and we are working with many of the colleagues that I see on the call today in order to assist them. But the plan has to be a plan of Ukraine, which articulates the growth priorities for the next 4 years around the reforms and investment. And at the same time, it would help in progressing in the accession negotiations with the Union, because having applied for the membership, Ukraine has also made a regulatory choice in terms of alignment to the EU legislation. And therefore, the reforms that will be undertaken as part of the plan will also be bringing Ukraine closer to becoming a member of the Union, because it would allow Ukraine to progress on the path of the alignment of part of the legislation towards the Union. So I think these are the main features. That medium-term planning is obviously a challenge. I think it's a challenge for any country. It's certainly a challenge for a country that is operating under tremendous uncertainty given the ongoing war. But we are confident that that together, such a planning on the Ukrainian side, and the financial support the Union side, would really help Ukraine to get onto a growth path, which is needed for the recovery and eventually construction. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. And the first question, actually, it would be the first question would be from me. And then перше питання буде від мене, а потім я
The first question will be from my side, and then I'll ask all other honorable audience. If you have a question for Anna, please do it now, because we have certain time limitation. I will now switch to English to ask the question. There are two questions. My first question was regarding the control.
On control, I know that the EU plans to quarterly assess Ukraine's progress in this plan. So how would it be done? Would you be considering the rule of law issues and so on and so forth? And what will be the role of the auditing committee in assessment of Ukraine's success? That's my first question. And my second question is, should it be aligned with the EU key chapters? Should the plan take into account the Ukraine's progress in the association agreement and opening and proceeding with the negotiations of entering the European Union? Дякую, thank you.
Thank you. We indeed propose that we would be paying Ukraine on the quarterly basis against the fulfillment of policy conditions that would be agreed as part of the plan between Ukraine and the Union, which means that we will have a list of elements that will have to be done in terms of specific milestones and steps undertaken towards specific reforms, or milestones and steps undertaken towards specific investments. And the Commission will be, so first of all, Ukraine will have to send to the Commission a report stating that these conditions have been fulfilled. The Commission would be assessing the fulfillment of these conditions, and when it finds that they are assessed, that have been satisfactorily met, then the Commission will proceed to payment. If some reforms would not be met, then part of the payment would be suspended, and Ukraine will have a chance to fulfill them, and therefore until the next quarter, and then the payment could be topped up at the next quarterly payment. So that's the kind of the basic premise. It all starts by Ukraine reporting to the Commission on the fulfillment of the conditions. On your second question, I think how much the reform plan and therefore the conditions in the plan would overlap with the acquis chapters is also pretty much a choice of Ukraine. We think it's logical that there will be quite some overlaps depending on the sectors that will be chosen for the Ukraine plan, and therefore the two processes should become mutually reinforcing. But the conditionality under the Ukraine facility does not substitute for opening or closing benchmarks of the accession negotiations. We rather see it as getting an extra incentive to fulfill elements that are needed for closing or opening a given chapter, given that there is a financial incentive attached to it for their fulfillment. It's not a process that substitutes itself for accession negotiations. It's a process that should help in progress in the accession negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two questions for you from our Q&A section. Could you please let me know if you have another 5 minutes, or how much do we have? So how many questions could I ask?
I have about 6 minutes.
6 minutes. Okay, perfect. I think we will fit in. So the first question is, what is the EU approach towards assuring tight control of funds usage? Thank you. I know that there will be this auditing committee, and maybe you can add something on that.
Thank you very much. The amount of money proposed is unprecedented in volume towards a third country. So it needs to be accompanied by sufficient safeguards so that we can convince member states to agree to this money towards Ukraine, and also afterwards to be able to properly report how it was spent and to be able to follow the money. So the regulation foresees kind of 3 layers of defense. The first one is Ukraine's internal control systems, and that's really fundamental. So we will want to engage into a dialogue in terms of how to improve them even further, how to make them better, and to see how they are functioning so that they provide the first really solid layer of control that ensures that the money goes where it's intended to go. Second, we are asking for the Commission to be able to look into any stage of a project implementation for a project which is covered by the plan. And that is again an extra insight, an extra power that would allow the Commission to take a view in terms of how the money is spent. That of course would have to follow a risk-based approach, like it always is with any control and audit strategy by the Commission towards the Union budget funds. And the third one is indeed a proposal to create an audit board, which is an independent body that would operate in Ukraine. And we would ask the Ukrainian authorities to give access to various relevant databases to this audit board. And their task, again, on the basis of a risk-based strategy, would be to monitor the use of the funds and to be able to report on any malfunctioning or misuse of the funds on the one hand. On the other hand, what we also propose is that that body also engages in support to the first element, to the strengthening of the internal control systems in the Ukrainian institutions, so these two can go hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you. For us, this internal control system reform was one of the first priorities indeed, and we did a lot of work on that, and I guess that it gets even more importance. So the second question from the audience is how do you plan to organize the consultations on the plan at this stage or later, minding the urgency of the adoption and regulation and the Ukraine's plan? So consultations, what about them? Do you plan to organize any?
I think the obligation to organize the consultation is on the Ukrainian government. This is then a part of the conditions in terms of how the plan is supposed to be prepared, with the sufficient involvement of the civil society, but also, the governmental levels and the local and self-government. So that is something that we expect the Ukrainian government to organize, indeed taking into account how tight the timing is, but that's certainly in everybody's interests. And we are certain that this is something that would happen very shortly.
Mm-hmm. The last question from the audience, I guess, and I was also very interested to hear that 50 billion is just the part of the resources which is needed to fund the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. And could you please explain which concrete directions or concrete operations are you expecting the government to focus on? So if, for example, we are talking percentages, like, I don't know, drawing a pie chart, right? What would you expect to see in Ukraine's plan? How much of social spending, how much of recovery and capital spending, and what are the directions?
50 billion is obviously only a part of what Ukraine needs over the next 4 years. And Ukraine needs can be probably divided into 3 big elements. One is support to the Ukrainian state, so the state budget. Second is financing of public investment. And third is de-risking of private investment. We would expect that in the first 2 years of the plan, the part that would have to support the budget would be probably relatively important. And also the part that would support public investment is probably more important than the de-risking of the private investment. And in the 2 last years of the plan, we would expect the budget support to be gradually lowering in importance because we expect that the internal revenue generation will pick up. And we would also expect that the private investments would start increasing, and therefore the de-risking would become important. I think it's far too premature from our side to be talking about any percentages in the pie chart. This is again something that we would first need to see a Ukrainian proposal for. But I think these are roughly the 3 big needs. And I think the expectation of their evolution over the next 4 years is what I've outlined.
Thank you very much. And thank you for both your support as the representative of the European Union and the Euro Commission, and just for your personal work towards support of Ukraine and helping us. If you want to say, I don't know, some last sentence or something to our audience, so you're welcome, and thank you for coming here.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Maybe just to say that putting together this plan is actually an incredibly difficult exercise, and we are deeply convinced that it is really an indispensable one and in the best interest of Ukraine. Think of it as your growth plan, as something that as such the whole society hopefully would be involved in, both in the planning and in the implementation. It's something that should facilitate bringing the country closer towards the union membership. It's a very difficult task. We have had very good and intense meetings with the colleagues from the government. A number of them are on the call, and we will spend hours discussing this. And I very, very, very much trust that together we will make it successful, Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ну і переходячи до тих колег Анни, які були
Thank you very much. And now, talking about those colleagues of Anna who have participated in those numerous meetings, I do introduce the next speakers to you: Oleksiy Sobolev, Deputy Minister of Economics of Ukraine; Ivan Nagornyak, Deputy Head of the General Director of the State Office of Euro; and North Atlantic integration, and Kryvolap, the director of the Center of Economic Recovery, advisor of the Prime Minister of Ukraine. I hope we shall hear now two also very interesting details from Ukrainian side on how this plan was prepared. Not less interesting than those which Anna referred us. Anna, can you, Oleksiy, can you talk now? What is the government planning to do and how the work is ongoing? Thank you. I will say a few things, not very long ones. First of all, bureaucratically, an interdepartmental working group headed by Yulia Sviridenko, first deputy Prime Minister, also Minister of Finances, Minister of Recovery and Finances, and a few other deputy ministers and participants make part of it. And for the second, we have to really very quickly, in a very short terms, to organize the work both inside the government and externally. And there are few issues which do work externally. One is consultancy with regions. Ministry of Recovery is responsible for that. They have to work on the go along with preparation of this plan. These consultations with the regions will happen. The second of the Ministry of Economics, we have to organize the interaction with the businesses, because these strategic sectors to be inbuilt into the plans. Talking about investment projects or directions to be supported by this, they have to be very realistic. If now a business doesn't understand how, they don't have the project and investment plans, then it's better not to propose such plans, because the money would be blocked. They will be there in the facility, but not will be used before a good and implementable investment projects will be available. So we are trying now to find those places where this volume of financing could be really implemented. And another point, together with the civil society, we are organizing a group of analytical centers with involvement of Kryvolap's center and other centers for it to be a joint Ukrainian plan. That is the goal. And we have, there is a big work to do with the government. But it's very well that we already worked when preparing for London conference. We communicated with many ministers. Some strategic directions have been outlined. There are many strategies already adopted, and many documents Ukraine is a signatory to. So we are starting all this work not from scratch. This work has to be finished, finalized before the end of October, I want to remind you. So I'm sure we will cope. Now talking about the terms, before the end of July, we have to produce outlines, a list of sections of the document and subsections, and a brief description of what will be there. So in the next 2 weeks, together with the government, we have to work on that to make it understandable to everybody. And after that, the drafting of the document will start. Everybody wants to see it, the final draft, and then will be the pre-final, very final, the utmost final. So the final version should appear before the beginning of October to finalize and to prove it through October. I believe it is the technical description of the work. I will not pass to Q&A, but I'll ask direct questions. First question from Tatiana: how the business could join to working groups? Are there some governmental email for coordination people could write to if they are interested to participate? Yes, the Kyiv School of Economics helps us to organize this part of job together with Big Four companies and other companies, and we shall send the relevant comments and we'll provide them. email. Okay, so the Kyiv School of Economics will have an email and will to use to join. There are some other issues from different people on the structure to be created to develop and implement the plan. Is there any group or everything will be decided at the level of different working groups? To restate the question, will be there any official body responsible for the development or it will be then adopted in the government? The Ministry of Economics is responsible for preparation of this plan as a head of this interdepartmental working group. Right now, I can't understand whether will it be approved by the government. Most probably yes. And who will be the signatory to the plan? In the next few days, we shall have calls with European colleagues and we shall determine how it will happen. But their responsibility on that is on the Ministry of Economics. There are a few questions on the participation of the civil society and how it will be engaged. I believe Oleksiy already answered in part. Oleksiy, might you comment additionally on how the civil society will be engaged besides consultants with the local self-government? I hope a lot that through this work with a group of analytical centers, you will enlarge the circle of the engaged stakeholders, and we shall work on this plan accordingly. Okay. What is important to understand, and we did discuss it? It is not a plan for everything. It is a plan for on three pillars Anna mentioned about them to provide macro stability, investments into the recovery, into the public infrastructure, and priority investments into the private sector. We are now considering there's no sense to put into this plan something outside of the scope of these three pillars. Why so? Because if we shall not stick with some commitments, you will not give us money for that. So we, Ukrainians, are interested to put into this plan what is really needed for us, for Euro integration. And for the second, really implementable issues for EU to be, EU it is more very interested into that. So they could tell their taxpayers, their voters, see, Ukraine has met all obligations, we can go on helping Ukraine. Also, everybody understands this plan is not sufficient for euros for Ukraine, those 50 billions. So there is an ambition for that plan to additionally engage or attract other funds of our other G7 partners, not available, but now, so we have to do this plan in such a way to implement, for Ukraine to be able to implement it and to stand to it and go on. I hope it will happen. Oleksiy, I ask you to stay to the end in our event. We shall now hear two other speakers, and I'll ask now to express the impression of this EU facility. Ivan Nagornyak, Deputy General Director of the State Office for Coordination of European and the North Atlantic Integration of Ukraine. Ivan, what do you think of this plan? Hello, Maria. Can you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you very well and we can see you. I'm very happy. First of all, when discussing this plan, I would say I would like to thank the Euro Commission for the work done. I have seen the feedback from expert society community, and many of them do praise this three pillars approach of this facility. At the same time, I want to say that for me, as a person involved in Euro integration of Ukraine, it's a very important political message which Euro Commission sent together with publication of this facility. What Anna said, they want to approximate Ukraine to Euro integration with realization of this plan. So the issues which will be there in recovery plan within this facility, Ukraine facility, will have to contain the measures we shall implement in the government in the context of accession negotiation. What do I mean? Looking at the recommendation provided by EU when we have got the status of pre-candidate for membership in the EU, there are some issues which require more than 1 or 2 years of effective measures, activities from the government. Relevant measures in the context of rule of law, of justice reform, and also measures in the context of legal issues. All those things have to be integrated into the plan. And we foresee that those priorities will be continuously under attention of European Commission. Also, the government is conducting the screening of Ukrainian legislation about how much in line with the modern legislation of EU. We have got many legal acts of the European Union. We assessed them, we assessed what we have to implement, what we have to do to implement those acts to adopt them in Ukraine. After this work will be over, we will prepare a program of legal approximation to EU and the priorities. Those priorities which will give us the initial stimulus implementation of those issues which will give us better access to European market or better knowledge by EU of our goods, which will allow us to faster and better enter EU market with our goods and services. It is one of our priorities. Obviously, EU is our largest trade partner by now, and our economic Euro integration is irreversible. That is why we believe this plan will allow us basically to implement these priority directions, which we already long ago started to realize within AA. And we continue to do it within the context of accession negotiations. One of the main priorities is public administration reform to enhance the institutionalization of the state, to increase the role of institutions. Obviously, without that, we couldn't implement that huge amount of legislative acts of acquis communautaire, be able to absorb the funds of EU and donors. So the added value of this facility will be possibility to finance our state institutions, our public institutions. Thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to answer the questions from the audience. I believe it is a very objective story we can discuss. Obviously, this is a very material, substantial story. From your side, will you include some EU key translation of documents on the technical aid, this circular for EU accession? Do you plan to do it? Talking about translations, we tried to integrate Ukraine to EU translate system of Euro Commission. So we're trying to take those acts which don't have direct force to translate them with this translation instrument. At the same time, now we are preparing a plan of priority translations, which are every year done within Euro integration. Every year this list is increasing. Now we have about 3,000 of such acts. Obviously, we hope for this technical help in this third pillar for these translations. We already have some instruments within this third pillar. That is for the first, for the second, relating Euro integrational priorities. We believe it will be also important to integrate a part of the commitments we have within AA on the measures to be implemented within the plan. There's a relevant percentage of implementation of all the commitments, all the obligations we undertook. We want to increase that volume. Will it be implemented in the plan or no? Anyway, we shall stick to them. But aiming to foresee the financing, we, the government office, we shall favor to put those items into the plan of the facility. In the chat, I have very many questions on the recovery and participation of local self-government authorities in the recovery and how the government sees the role of municipalities in the development of the relevant institutional plans. Unfortunately, we don't have the Ministry of Recovery in connection with us right now. So I propose now to switch to Kryvolap, who will talk on behalf, who will participate on behalf of the civil society and think tank in the work of coordination for development of such plan for Ukraine. Might he give us some insight in this regard? If no, then we shall ask other speakers to have the response. I will talk about 3 points. Also, I want to comment that I'm not the only representative of the civil society think tank in this process. There is a really very large matrix showing who is engaged in the first button and then the other. So think tank is a great wave. Everybody will be able to participate, to engage. Both for national strategy and for government plans, we have such the government has such an experience. 3 aspects. What is important, in my opinion, for economic recovery center, as an economic recovery center expert, to understand what is this plan, what it is not is. It was already mentioned it's not a comprehensive plan to help the country in the nearest 4 years. It's more like the IMF problem, IFC problem with the specific parameters and indicators, which will be difficult to change. If you would like to have some change, then we have to restart the whole procedure, and that will be a long-term issue. So this document doesn't give us an answer. For example, do we need a museum for Holodomor or no? But we have answers for all the key issues concerning conversion of international assistance into the stable development and growth. And this is practically the only way to balance our budget in the long-term perspective. So this, our expectations from this plan has to be somewhat mitigated. And this can be a beginning of a large plan because it will start with the analysis of microfinancial situation, our limitations, our your integrational limitations, and then this analysis will be used in our negotiations in our talks with UK, USA. But it is a very good focused and balanced beginning of work on this plan. The second pillar, and there was a question in the chat, we are living in a very high uncertainty now. So how can we focus on some policy? conditions. We know that every quarter there will be control. You know, 16 times EU will come to you with these questions. EU understands there is an active phase of the war. We have certain uncertainty for military scenarios. There are certain assumptions, but still you understand it is a war. There is no 100% guarantee that the peace agreement will come exactly at the expected time. So we have to be very careful with the objectives. So the questions from the chat, let's think about this, let's think about this, but yes, let's consider it, but let's put this as for the third quarter of 2024, not early. Like a person who wants to lose weight says, I will go to fitness, I will not drink, etc. But one has to be honest with these limitations and with these objectives. We have to understand also that for the third pillar, that this facility is an informal beginning of accession negotiations before they are formal, before they are official beginning, because the issues of access to market, the issue of European value chains, all this will be discussed because our agricultural export is overlapping with our negotiations with Poland. So our partners expect us for at least identify the sectors and the markets for Ukraine to happen economically. It's very important for the business to engage now and to say where the business sees perspectives, where we can integrate, where we can engage investments, how it will refer to our economic geography. It's very important. As the center of your integration, we participated in the preparations of the relevant question. We understand now very serious and substantial discussions will happen about market approach, etc. Another comment. It's very well that the facility is focused, and there are topics which always have been tasked with an asterisk for Ukraine. These are cross-sectoral issues, and it was very difficult to unite different ministers for them to achieve same view. It is the issue of business climate, the issue of Euro integration and green transformation, and maximum of focus was put on those issues. And we have to give clear answers on our plans and our expectations. And expectations which will make part of this document. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kyrylo. I'm switching now to the issues, to the questions from chat. There is one position, one question, which we have to aim at self-sustainability, self-sufficiency and free economics in the country. Not to take debts, not to increase our debt load. We have to develop a good, sustainable, stable, and modern country with strong economics to become a strong partner, a future member of EU, which will be interesting to international players as itself, not like a object of charity. Oleksiy, do you have optimism in this regard? Will it be possible within those 50 billions, which are not sufficient to cover even that financial gap already charged by IMF by now? Will be able to plan and implement this plan to become in 4 years more modern, more stable and strong to recover from this war, from this situation? I thank you for this question. I believe it's very important. It is a message that Europe waits for us. Look, these are first monies, and together, jointly, we have money. You will get a plan and implement the plan to provide for your integration. And this, I believe, is a part of, is the first attempt, which will be then increased. Then other partners may join this. For the second, I believe it is possible, and I believe it's very good. We have switched from dreams to this our chance to have a plan for ourselves, to have a plan which has to be wider. This plan is only a part. In line with its successful execution, fulfillment, I believe it might be enlarged if we'll be successful in its implementation. It depends upon us. I believe it's possible. I believe Ukraine is as prepared as never before for that. And as regards development, those 8 billions which will be directed for investments, they will be converted into as a minimum 20 billions of private investments. They will not come during year 1 or year 2 of the facility. There will be about 7 billions on the year 2, year 3, and year 4. Ukraine attracted maximum of 12 billion of investments in 2007, 2008. So it will be sufficient for investment. And if the partners will join, there will be a lot of investment. So we have to good well to be able to absorb all that, to utilize all this, all those investments. A question to Ivan. I haven't asked because to Anna, because Anna was limited in time. Maybe Ivan would be able to answer. What structure is responsible in Europe for oversight and implementation of this facility? And how would you comment on what Anna said? What will be the steps, when, what, and how by Europeans, and what we Ukrainians can do so this all would be successful and this regulation will be adopted in EU? Thank you, Maria. Talking from the point of view of, I will start from the end of your question. The adoption of this proposal by EU Commission. First of all, it will be voted in the Euro Parliament. So it has to pass the relevant committee, and then it has to be voted in the Euro Council. After they support this proposal, after there will be final voting, in the meantime, there might be some spot changes. We know that separate EU member countries are putting their national interests into the decision of the European Union. Nevertheless, I believe that the time frame will be approximately as follows. The voting would happen at the end of 2023, because the review of long-term EU budget up to 2027 will happen exactly in 2024. So this facility is integrated into that budget review process as well. If it will not be adopted at the end 23, beginning 24, it's obvious a great number of events, of measures will be not planned because it will not be included into the budget list, and the content of the proposal would be transformed. Talking about Euro integration now, we expect that in the middle of October, Euro Commission will launch enlargement package. That is how the Euro Commission sees the process of accession of one or other candidate country to European Union. And we expect to receive 2 documents. The first one would be analytical review document of approximation status. They will assess the status of implementation of UAKI on 33 chapters, and also we expect to receive an additional document on the evaluation of our political criteria set up in June 22, when we have got candidate status and recommendation to launch negotiations with Ukraine according to that process. After that, the ball will go to the field of a European Council, and we accept that in December, the position of Euro Commission in the Council will be voted and approved. So I do support what Kyrylo said, that to a great extent, what will be there in the plan on separate sectors will also partly reflect our negotiation position. Because it will be integrated in those future benchmarks EU will set up for us in the context of opening and closing negotiation chapters. From my side, I do support your position on the inclusion of these funds into the support, because we have to see clear, forecastable, predictable, and transparent guarantee of having this money, because for Ukraine to remain without financial support now would mean to remain without life subsistence, without an oxygen support. I believe everybody has now to work for this to be adopted, to be approved. We have few questions, we have time. And this question relates to Ukraine, recovery of Ukraine. We don't have representatives of the Ministry of Recovery here, unfortunately. So, colleagues, could you take this question to answer? For example, are there money from those 50 billions foreseen for demining of Ukraine, for mine clearance? I may answer that for sure we can put a point of the plan dedicated to mine clearance, to demining. I may comment. The funds for demining and humanitarian fund follow as a track the so-called DG ECHO, the institution responsible for humanitarian issues, humanitarian aid, and also the European Peace Facility. We shall continue to finance the direction. They finance the expenses of member states to help Ukraine in this field.
Дякую. Да, я
стосовно regarding mine clearance, the Ministry of Economics is coordinating the humanitarian demining. What's important to say here, the plan will not state where money goes. This money will be directed to the budget or to the strategic sectors. If that is not investments which will be described per sector, I don't believe there will be some specific projects. You will not see specifically the demining. The need for demining will appear in the plan most probably because it is necessary for recovery, for people to come back to the cities, to build up the infrastructure, etc. Same for agricultural sector is important. The demining. Eventually, demining will be put as one of the activities necessary for investments into the agricultural sector. The Ministry of Economics works on the creation of the market of demining services to have more operators to be able to get contracts on demining of certain size. But for sure, it will be present in the documents, but not in the facility plan. Each euro will not be assigned to a specific aim. It will be distributed through the budget. That is why you will work with our controlling facilities to be able to control this budget utilization problem. Now switching to control organs, we don't have Ministry of Finance in connection, but the question is there, EU set up a requirement for audit and control, and also said on it, will Ukraine create a special authority or body for tracing and monitoring? We have in our accountant chamber, the relevant division, the EU wants also to increase control over finances and to enhance our internal control system in these 4 years. Might somebody answer? I may partially answer this question. The relevant criteria of EU and relevant recommendation of FATF, which are integrated into our recommendation for anti-money laundering, and the reforms are foreseen there. In any way, we shall adhere to this EU requirements. As regards this facility, as represented by you, the so-called Auditor Council will be created. I don't remember exactly in which article of the document. It provides the creation of an internal audit by EU over the relevant facility. And they will warn Ukraine about some elements of possible abuse when found, when detected. And then depending upon how Ukraine will react on that, they will take decision on next financing. So all these issues are interconnected, and I do see also here an aspect of legal approximation and anti-money laundering and fighting the abuse. So this EU facility is very much interconnected with it. In any way, European Union is very strict and thorough in realization of this recommendation number 4 for anti-money laundering. Will not be, they will be very rigorous and very strict in this relation, and it's good and normal. I see nobody else may comment on this, so I will switch to the question of my concern. And this question will be to all our panelists, the colleagues. I understand for it to happen, I want to ask all of you, each of you, in your relevant area, what might go wrong? What could be the key challenge, and where do you see to put some straw mat to mitigate eventual difficulties, so for everything to happen as wanted, and how each of us could help, or at least not to interfere, so that everything would go smoothly on the plan of Ukraine. Let's start with Kyrylo. This document will start from the section of macro financial planning. The document by itself is a large budget declaration on steroids, and its inspiration have been the COVID plans prepared by European countries during the epidemics. During the COVID, there was more clarity about how it would develop. In our case, we can hope that the fight and the hostilities will be over in 1 year, as President says, but there is some basic scenario agreed by IMF, 15 billion of deficit for 4 years, but there is non-basic scenario for 145 billion. Those military scenario when the budget was prepared has been prepared last year. It was expected Russia would be over with their resources before July this year, but they had another mobilization, etc., and this scenario didn't happen. So if we shall wait for investments 1 year and a half, and this recovery, we have 1 year and a half to make clean in Ukraine's household. Oleksiy, what is the major challenge in preparation and implementation of this plan? What can go wrong? What is your major challenge? The terms are very ambitious, as Kyrylo mentioned. It happens, something could be corrected afterwards, but it is always difficult to correct something after. So the technical work to be made in 3.5 months is to agree, to re-agree with everybody, to satisfy everybody. It will be difficult. What could be done now? We have to get united. Understand the positions. Everybody dreamed about something. It is not a plan answering all of our needs, but it is something that might transform into a comprehensive plan answering all our needs. How to do reform, how to do reforms for which money is paid without loans, and how it could be said. We have to put into the plan what is realistic to implement, and then to implement it really. So this is now the chance and moment when we can put into the first part of the plan all that what could be done at the level, at the relevant levels. There is original level of the civil society organizations, etc. If you can unify and plan your sector's needs, there are more chances relevantly on that it will be realistic, that it will go to the plan and you will be able to use it, and your economic will be developed. So I believe internally we have to do a lot of job, a lot of work. We are trying to organize very widely some consultants of everybody with everybody. It's difficult. It will be difficult to happen. But I understand, as already mentioned, we never have been as well prepared as now for that. Ivan, what is the major challenge for your integration office? Thank you for your question. I want to tell that basically we understand that there are relevant priorities which will be outlined by separate ministers. First of all, the Ministry of Economics, and the task for our office and Governmental Euro Integration Office will be to prevent from those issues being integrated in the plans which are conflicting and counterstanding the interests of Euro integration. We are doing it already. We are creating our relevant resources. We have our experts to make us ready to analyze those issues. As the first point, and the second point, as I already mentioned, certain provisions in the plan will also reflect our plans as regards legal approximation, and it will influence on the dynamics of our negotiation process for Ukraine's US accession. So we have to put sufficient priorities and be able to finance, thanks to the plan, our legal approximation. So to use this facility for our legal approximation is one of our tasks. Obviously, under the condition we live now, a lot depends from our defenders. It is true. Now let us talk about local self-government authorities and communities participation. Colleagues, who from you are ready to talk about it? Please raise your hand to take this question. Nobody, unfortunately, so I apologize.
дискусії перед слухачами. На жаль, Мінвідновлення і місцевих органів влади.
Unfortunately, we don't have the Ministry of
стратегії громад і питання
Recovery and Territorial Communities, so the development of the relevant strategy.
в рамках цього івенту, але я думаю,
Unfortunately, today we
ще не один
may not cover
і цьому
this
плану,
issue,
і
but I believe more events will be dedicated to the facility. In the document itself, in the principles laid down into the plan, obviously there is an element of decentralization and local ownership, so that the people in place would feel their engagement to the plan, and in that its implementation will help their economic development of their community. So basically this element is reflected there. And obviously it will depend upon relevant consultants with them. And depending upon what instruments they do have, it will depend. Also, I have this impression from what I read, I saw that decentralization and they work with local government authorities is like a red thread going cross-sectionally, also together with the issue of gender balance and other sensitive issues. It says about how much decentralization and democracy is important at the local level.
Тут у нас теж є запитання.
We have a question in the chat.
В ЄС проводяться екологічні та стратегічні оцінки впливів для планів.
There are environmental and strategic environmental assessment of all the plans. Is there any SEA for this plan as well? No, I want to ask, have somebody seen strategic environmental assessment of IMF program? How to understand what this plan is and what it is not. It is not an answer to all the question. It is a practical plan on attraction of funds, of monies. And it also describes the conditions, the requirements for it to happen. From my side, I want to say that nobody refused climatic neutrality, and our energy strategy is drafted, and everything concerning industrial development is based upon Build Back Better, and obviously it is aiming to achieve climate neutrality. I want to add about another challenge. The facility says the plan cannot contain some projects which are not in line with the national energy and recovery and climatic requirements. Talking about green transition, Ukraine has to achieve carbon-free status. According to our commitments, the plan has to be approved for energy and climate has to be approved in June 2024, in 1 year. But we understand that all is strategic tasks on how this green transition will happen in the industries. What has to be built for that, how it should be financed. It has to be solved before the end of September, middle of October, because it all will come to Ukrainian plan. These documents are very strongly intertwined. So these are requirements. We wanted to finalize it in February, but we shall have to finalize it in October, much earlier. We'll do it. And all this green agenda will be very strongly reflected in the Ukrainian plan. They would not contain something to contradict the green transition. Yeah, it is not the only document which is overlapping. There are many cross-cutting documents. I will ask a last question eventually before letting our speakers go. This is a question to Oleksiy. It goes about Kherson. There are shelling, there have been occupation, and now this flooding. So when Where an enterprise can apply to get support? You can support to state labor into the local administration, oblast administration, and to the state banks. All the banks have program of support of deoccupied territories. They have guarantee programs. First of all, we are working on attracting more resources of our partners for this, and we expect for good news here, maybe this week, maybe the next one. I hope for hundreds millions of dollars to be directed to this sector. And for the second, we right now working on changing the 579 program and to adapt it especially for deoccupied territories to have some state guarantees for a great part of loans, so to relaunch enterprises. But we need to have jobs where the government will renew the infrastructure. We're interested to make people come back and have their jobs there. So the help is coming. There will be additional monies for you, for sure. Thank you, Oleksiy. Before wrapping up and giving some finalization to our panelists, I want to say all who are listening to us now that the war means a big requirements for tactical medicine needs. If you are participating, if you are watching our monthly events, please go to Leleka Care page. You can Google it. They are collecting raising funds for medical kits to help our fighters on the front line. Please make your donations and it will help more Ukrainians to survive in the front line. That's all I wanted to tell. Dear colleagues, any of your thoughts for the facility or in relation to it, please state them and we shall wrap up thereafter. Ivan, I may say that basically based upon how shall we move to European Union, and the methodology of enlargement was approved. One of the key priorities would be obviously the rule of law and also implementation of EU legal acts in the area of public procurement and finances. In this connection, I urge the colleagues from analytical centers, from civil society, and me and Kyrylo and you, Maria, we are working very actively on how to, as the best way, implement the EU legal acts in this area, and from this will depend the success of our Euro integration. So I urge all analytical centers to review it, to supervise, monitor, and to follow how it happens and to comment on it. Kyrylo, I want to say that the facility, despite all of its limitations, is very complex, very difficult. Ukraine never had prepared so detailed, so detailized documents to comply with such a facility, specifically under the conditions of such high uncertainty. I want to thank everybody who are organizing correctly this work. This is a task within Nesteris, but Ukraine really was never so well prepared as now to create the plan. So I thank everybody for your work. Yes, I really thank everybody. It is a joint work, joint case. We have to be realistic and practical now. This is a document which can build up the trust of large-scale business relationships with the EU. I hope we'll succeed in that. And it will appear because we are preparing some realistic plans and we are taking realistic commitments which we'll stick with to enable the enlargement of this document. I believe in it. So I ask all of you to organize yourself at your level and to outline the most realistic priorities to be included in the plan eventually. Thank you very much.
Зараз ті люди, завдяки яким Україна і наші з вами діти можуть жити в Європейському Союзі, а не в страшній сірій зоні між
All who are
Росією
listening to you, those are
розваленим світом.
those thanks to whom the speakers are those thanks to whom we'll be able to live in Europe, not in other world. First of all, it goes about armed forces of Ukraine. Yes, yes, obviously. In the first place, armed forces of Ukraine, but you also do a lot for that, and I thank you very much to you. So thank everybody to participate in the event. We hope to see Ukraine independent and a member of EU. I thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Maria. See you.